themselves, and then we'll look all friendly like when it starts up.
You want to give it like yeah, you guys can go ahead and start whenever you want.
Okay.
All right, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you so much for coming today. So I'm going to introduce my colleague and the presenter today, Joy Campbell. So we'll be talking about the Title VI Language Centers and Language Teaching Resources. So thank you for coming today. Let's welcome her.
Thank you. Given that it's such a small group, which it's actually larger than I thought it might be, but feel very free to hop in with questions or interrupt me, or if you want more clarification on something. I think we can keep this pretty casual. I do have a co-presenter who I hope will be joining us at some point. We'll just kind of backtrack to his slides if he hasn't made it in by the time we're at that point in the session. So. I will be talking today about some general resources from the language resource centers and other Title VI centers, so that you can just learn a little bit more about them. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the Title VI resource centers, so we just thought it would be a good thing to bring up to the language population, the language instructors here on campus. So I know we have a Russian instructor. What other languages do we have represented here, just so I know? English. Okay, English teaching. Yep. And what? You're not a you're a student. Okay, wonderful. And do you teach, or are you a student?
In China, I'm a college teacher.
Okay.
I teach business, just bilingual languages.
Okay.
English and Chinese.
Okay, but maybe Chinese for business purposes, that kind of thing. Okay, excellent. Good. That's helpful for me to know.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is just sort of a little bit of a history of Title VI as it pertains to Michigan State University. Some of you may know this, but some of you might have no idea what this history is. So the Title VI refers to a particular act in Congress called the Higher Education Act, and this was started in the late 1950s. Why did it start? Sputnik went up in 1957, okay? And everybody in the strategic planning and defenses and education realized, oh boy, and it started off this whole, well, it started off the Cold War is when it started. But that action, precipitated so many things, the race for the moon landing and things like that. But what it did for languages is it started what now is Title VI. And it devoted federal funding to the teaching and learning of foreign languages, especially those considered strategic. At that time, of course, it would have been Russian and many of those Eastern Bloc languages at that time. So what they realized at that time was that there were not nearly enough Americans studying these less commonly taught languages. You had a lot of German, heritage languages, but you did not have people taking Russian, taking some of these other strategic languages that they considered really important for national defense. And so they founded Title VI. For example, at that time in 1958, there were only 23 students taking Hindi in the entire country. So Title VI was founded, as far as the Department of Education knew. Title VI began in an effort to promote the teaching and learning of foreign languages for national strategic needs. MSU has, of course, a long history of international collaborations, and we had actually appointed, as the first major U.S. university to do so, an international dean in 1956. So we were definitely ahead of the curve even. And then those first area study centers, like I said, were established in 1958. MSU has had an African Studies Center since 1960. Continuous Title VI funding, as far as I can tell, since 1960, which is a huge legacy. We've had an Asian Studies Center that opened in 2000 and was funded, hi Galen, up until this year, or last year. We had the Center for Advanced Study of International Development, that's CASID. We've had the CLACS, or the Center for Latin American Caribbean Studies. So MSU has a rich tradition of Title VI funding, this federal funding that supports the languages on campus. The Centers for International Business Education, so this is the cyber. Our cyber here at MSU was established in 1990, just a couple of years after that first CYBER was funded by the Department of Education. Those provide resources for business language and for international business collaborations. So, and then the language resource centers, which will be the most, the thing that I talk about the most. Those were established in 1990. CLEAR was founded in 1996 and continued for 22 years up until last October when our cycle ended. So some of you may know about some of those Title VI centers, but there really are three different kinds. The National Resource Centers, which are things like Asian Studies, African Studies, the CIBES or CYBERs, which are the Business Research Centers, and then the Language Resource Centers. So I just wanted to point that out. The two that are bold here, African Studies and CYBER, of the 6 Title VI centers that put in grants for the 2018 to 22 funding cycle, those are the only 2 that got it this time. It's a very, very stiff competition. And so instead of housing up to 6 Title VI centers as MSU has in the past, we currently host 2 of them. So actually my colleague Galen, walked in and then he walked out again. He went to grab his flash drive. We're going to come back to Galen's slides. Any questions generally about, shall I stall till he comes back?
In the U.S., how many total Title VI centers are there?
That's a good question. There are, I believe, 16 CYBERs. There are 16 LRCs. And I am not entirely sure how many NRCs there are. At one time, it was up to 135, but I think that it is fewer than that now. There used to be about 32 CYBERs, and they cut those in half in about 2012. Title VI went through some major funding cuts in 2011 and 12. And CLEAR's budget, for example, was slashed by 42%. And the last 2 cycles have remained at that half of the rate of what they were like in the 90s and early 2000s. So we'll come back maybe to Galen's slides, and I'll just talk maybe briefly about CLEAR, and then we'll have his slides because he is representing the African Studies Center and their resources, and then I'll finish up by coming back to the LRCs. So probably many of you, is anybody not familiar with CLEAR? Okay, so you know that, like I said, for 22 years we were here on campus. Sue Gass was one of the founding co-directors, along with Patricia Paulsell, who was a German professor. She retired about 6 years ago. And Charlene Polio took over as the co-director of CLEAR in its final cycle from 2014 to 18. So, sorry? Does someone? Okay. So we were around for 22 years. I've been here on campus for 17 years and worked with CLEAR for over 15. So we had several areas of focus, so foreign language advocacy, professional development. We did a lot with summer workshops, for example, for language teachers. And then we did a lot of materials development for the some commonly taught, but mostly the less commonly taught languages, because that is what the federal funding requires us to do to work toward, again, those strategic languages. That's still a main focus of the language resource centers, to work with languages that are considered strategic or instrumental to the nation's defense. And then we did a lot of research. We worked with many, many different professors over the years, funding research projects that would further the field of language education in some way. So even though CLEAR is no longer a Title VI center here on campus, so we don't exist with that structure anymore, all of the materials that we developed, or the ones that are still up to date enough to be published, are still available at the same URL that we existed at for all of those years. So you can still go to clear.msu.edu. You can see all the back issues of our newsletter, and you can see the titles of the professional development sessions that we gave, just so you can have kind of an idea of what was offered. That's something I know that CeLTA is hoping to carry forward in the future. It would be to sort of fill that gap that was left by CLEAR's closing, to maybe offer some of those professional development opportunities in the future. But the materials that are still available are on that same website, the same URL. Okay, Galen's still not here, so I'll just go through, and we may have his African Studies section more at the end. Okay, so CLEAR does still exist. in that archive form. But there are 16 language resource centers across the nation right now that are up and funded and have funding for this 2018 to 2022 funding cycle. And there are really the similar areas of focus that CLEAR had, so that advocacy, working to promote the study of world languages, working with school districts, superintendents, state level, education department, that kind of thing. So different centers have different things that they focus on, but a lot of advocacy work is done by the LRCs. Professional development is one of the main tenets of Title VI and what the funding goes toward for those language resource centers. Materials development, of course. And then, under some of those, you could have a LICTL initiative that fits into professional development and K through 12. That kind of thing. These numbers are from just 2 years of LRC reports. So that's 2014 to 16 is when the most recent ones were able to be to grab. But so you can see out of 16 centers, because this represents last cycle, so there were also 16 centers, of which CLEAR was one. Almost 500 research publications came out of that Title VI funding, or digital tools, almost 2,000 digital tools. And I don't know exactly how they're defining that, but these would be tools that teachers or students could use to somehow further their language learning. So those centers, the 16 centers that are open right now, are still carrying out this mission then for another 4-year cycle until 2022. This is where the 16 current LRCs are located. So you can really see they go from Hawaii all the way over to the East Coast. So there's really a large spread of geography here of where they're located. And just because there isn't one in Michigan anymore doesn't mean that you can't have access to these. It's just that it would be harder to get to their on-site professional development, for example. But they really are spread out at universities all over the place. And then in the past, we've had them, like I said, here at Michigan State. Carla in Minnesota is another very, very well-known language resource center that is also not funded in this particular cycle, but was funded for 25 years before that. There have been LRCs at Brigham Young University in Utah. There was one at San Diego State University. There's one at CUNY in New York. So they really have been, there's a core that have been in existence for many, many years, many, many cycles. And then there are always a couple that drop out and a couple that come in and are newly funded. So just to give you an idea of where they're located. Okay. Pearl is new, yep. So the new ones are Pearl, and they're coming up. There's more slides, yep. So there's 2 different kinds. Do you want me to just finish my section and you can come? Okay. So there are 2 different kind of types of LRCs. Some are more of a general focus. That's what CLEAR was. We didn't have a particular regional focus or language that we worked with specifically, but these are so the currently existing general centers. I'll just let you read them. They're not more of the general ones. Culture's been around just 1 cycle. Hawaii has been around for longer than CLEAR. It's one of the only 2 that was older than CLEAR. And then these are the 3 new ones. So these are the brand new centers that were just funded last fall. So one in Kansas, one in Maryland, and one in Utah. And so these are the one at, so Silk, CLEAR, and Carla all did not get funded, and these are the 3 new ones that did. Mm-hmm.
Can I ask how much of what's there besides Open Language Resource Center is actually open access?
A lot of it.
And so on.
Yes, a lot. Most of it's free and most of it's open. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll give specific examples of some of the products later. And when I show you the LRC website, you'll see that there's a way that you can search for materials only that are free. So, yep. And not that many people know about the language resource centers, but we are a federal resource that taxpayer money has funded these projects and products. And sometimes the centers worked with other centers on their campus. So sometimes the Title VI money supports and helps expand work that's already being done at a center on a campus. It's a little different. CLEAR was just its own thing, and without the Title VI funding, we no longer exist. But for example, Carla had Title VI funding for many years in Minnesota, but they were part of a larger center, much like CeLTA. And so Carla still exists at the University of Minnesota. They just don't have federal funding anymore through Title VI, but their projects are ongoing. So depending on how much of the federal funding was used for a particular project, it may or may not be fully free. As there's no fully free, it either is or it isn't, right? But so different centers do have different things that are available, but if it's purely LRC produced, it really should be open. And then the other type of LRC is the regional ones where you have a specific geographic or language focus. So these are the ones that are in this current funding cycle that have a specific focus. And I mention that because some of, like the one at Duke would be for the Slavic languages, more interesting. We do have the African Languages Center at Indiana as well. Okay. So the takeaway for today, and I'll go through some individual projects that different LRCs have done just so you can kind of see the breadth of what they have on offer. But what I really want you to know and to go home with is one of these brochures. So there's this brochure, and then there's the Common LRC website, and this is kind of your one-stop shop for finding out information about the LRCs. You can go to each one individually, of course, and they all have different independent websites, but on this common website, all of the LRCs put their materials in one spot, and they're all tagged in the database so that you can go in and look for intermediate materials for writing in Chinese and find any LRC that has a material in that parameter. Okay, so the brochure does go through kind of those main focus areas, and then it gives a little blurb about each LRC as well, so you know what each one is doing. And it's just a nice, we hand these out at, CLEAR actually did the first one of these, probably, I don't know, 12 years ago. And we've handed out hundreds and hundreds and thousands of them by now on the Hill. They take these to senators' offices, they take them to the language roundtables, the interagency language roundtables, and people in Washington love paper, and they love to be able to touch brochures and stuff. So these have been very instrumental in furthering the mission of the LRCs. Okay. So as you've seen, like the different activities that the LRCs do, and these are topics that I'll be covering, just a couple of products in each one, so that you can get kind of an idea of the things that are available. So assessment, I'll be talking about, classroom materials, heritage language. Does anybody have heritage students? Not so much in this crowd? Okay. Because there is a heritage language LRC that has done some really, really neat stuff. And then professional development and research and advocacy. So I'll pull just a few products from that common website, talk about each one very, very briefly, and then we'll hear from Galen about the LRC, or the African Studies Center. So as far as assessment, we do have a assessment and evaluation LRC where that is their main focus. They're out of Georgetown. I just pulled a couple of things. So that is the AELRC, is that assessment and evaluation LRC. They've developed a set of C tests for 3 different languages, and these are low cost. They're reliable. They've been internally tested, and they're useful for just sort of estimating global proficiency in a student population. So I tried to pick languages that I thought we might have representation from in this crowd. So they're working to finalize the validation on their Mandarin test, and then they're working on the Turkish and Russian ones in this cycle. So that's a very current project that you can watch for if that's something that interests you. And they'll also be developing a web system for sharing these C tests freely available. C tests are, what does it stand for?
Small texts, like, I'm not sure couple of hundred words, and then the words, some words, according to a certain algorithm, are deleted, and you have to fill in the blanks.
Okay.
And with the C test, and there are a couple of different formats there. Often the first letter or the first two letters are given of the word. And it's a very reliable measure of, some would argue vocabulary, others would say general proficiency.
They're saying global proficiency, but there's some debate apparently. But for something that's free, that will be available in multiple languages, something worth considering. This CAVO is out of the National East Asian Language Resource Center. Again, I thought we might have some Chinese instructors here, but that's a vocabulary testing tool, an adaptive computer tool that will be available. Some of these are projects that exist, and some of them are ones that were proposed for this coming cycle. So they're under development right now. Another couple of projects. Sometimes LRCs collaborate on projects. So this one is with Castles, which is in Oregon, and the AELRC, that Assessment and Evaluation LRC in Washington, at Georgetown. So this is one, the IPIC is Intercultural, Pragmatic, and Interactional Competence. That's what that stands for. And this uses digital simulations to determine students' abilities to navigate intercultural encounters. So it goes a little bit beyond just learning grammar, but it's more of the pragmatic side of what we do in language education. So it also, in some languages this is more important than others, but this one specifically also deals with power levels and social situations. So that's kind of an interesting take. And once they've gone through this measure, it creates a learner profile that's based on knowledge, analytical abilities, subjectivity, and awareness. So kind of like a little assessment that you can use with your students. And that one I think is on mobile. That's why it's got that cute little graphic, but that's on multiple platforms. Another thing just to bring up is that CeLTA, which is down in Indiana, is doing projects with 13 different Central Asian languages, so very regional specific, but they're working on proficiency guidelines and tests for 13 different languages that they're going to be validating in this cycle. So they've done the framework and they're working on developing the test materials and then piloting them in this cycle. Sometimes LRCs will have a project that begins in one cycle with some groundwork or research base, and then it'll progress through different phases in other cycles if they get funded. Okay, classroom materials, probably the most hands-on useful things that teachers can have. So I pulled, I think I have 3 different slides, just talking very generally about some of the materials available. So CalPER is at Penn State, and they have this, the concept-based language instruction modules. Again, these are just eliciting grammatical and pragmatic concepts through sort of situational, communicative activities online. And then the image is from something called VALT, which is the Virtual and Augmented Reality Language Training. So that's what the little picture is from. That's, again, a collaboration between Castles and Coral. And they've got 2 languages so far, and they're working on adding others. But this puts you in an immersive environment, through using the computer or a mobile device, puts you in an immersive environment so you can learn language skills. And it's supposed to be somewhat career-based, so for specific purposes. So it might be business-based, or it might be for nursing, medical field, that kind of thing. And each module is within a particular professional domain and contains information, has vocabulary, grammar, and communication strategies, and has a lot to do with real-life communication. So actual situational awareness, that kind of thing. Okay. Coral is down at UT Austin, and their whole purpose for existing is these open educational resources. So this is all freely available online. And they have a ton of stuff, including some of the more commonly taught languages, because Coral existed before it became a Title VI center. So everything that they've developed in the past, they're also making open through their Title VI website. But they've got this open online textbook. The one that I grabbed is for Spanish, but they also have a lot with French. The co-director down there is a French speaker, French educator. So lots of shared resources as well, teachers uploading their own ideas. NFLRC is the one in Hawaii, one of the only ones that was older than CLEAR. And they have a fantastic resources on project-based language learning. It's called the Pebble repository for project-based. And they have really neat projects that teachers have shared. So teachers can go to Hawaii or take an online webinar on project-based language learning. They're very, very good at educating educators about project-based learning. And then those teachers can share materials to their repository where it's all tagged and then freely available for others to use. So some of the, I just grabbed 4 of the titles that I thought were really interesting from this free database. So one is called Empowering Second Grade French Students to Become Global Citizens. So a project-based thing that some second grade teacher developed for others to be able to use. Or Japanglish, looking at the culture through the mirror of language. One is called Not So Fast, the influx of American fast food in Italy and its effects on Italian youth. So there's so much out there that maybe you can kind of start down that path. If project-based is interesting to you, you can learn about some of these. Another one grabbed my attention was Growing a Russian Language Community at a Midwestern Liberal Arts College. So somebody's experiences with trying to create a community around the language that they're teaching. So this is just scratching the surface of what's available, really. The last slide on classroom materials then, NFLRC again in Hawaii also puts materials into their Scholar Space, which is kind of their open resource for academic work. They have stuff in 16 different languages that I found. They have over 350 resources that people have added to that repository as well. So it's different from their Pebble one, which is specifically project-based. But this one has a nice tagged system, so you can't read that. But online Chinese for minority serving institutions, for example, or Chinese language video lessons for classroom use, Asian role play cards. So there might be just little bits and pieces where somebody's already gone to the work to create something that you might be able to use in your classroom. And the last classroom material that I grabbed was Circle, which is in Arizona, and Coral have collaborated on this, foreign languages and the literary in the everyday. So they have taken things like authentic text, they've taken memes or YouTube videos, slam poetry, and then created materials around these authentic texts that could be used in your classroom. And these are teacher authored. So again, teachers who have done something and thought that it was cool enough to share with the wide world is all available in this. And it's, this one is aiming to develop language awareness as well as the communicative abilities through all 4 skills, speaking, listening, reading, and writing. Just through using everyday things that you see. So those are, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of classroom resources. I just grabbed a very few from kind of a variety of centers to sort of give you that general idea. We said we didn't have much in the way of heritage. I just have one slide, but there are different things that are going on for heritage teachers. Some very language specific, like, Pashto. Others may be of more use. There have been some things with Russian, for example, a lot with Spanish, and this is coming out of Coral, which is in Texas. So their population is much more likely to be a native or heritage speakers of Spanish. But I'll leave that there for just a minute. There's what?
Their summer workshop.
Yes. Yeah.
They have an online course as well.
Some of the centers have more technology personnel, and so they're able to do sort of online webinars and things like that. We didn't get to that point with CLEAR, but those who have been able to make them accessible for wider audiences, of course, are opening it up. So lots of heritage resources. And then sort of segueing into the professional development, part of the mandate, part of the language in Title VI is that you have to provide professional development for language educators. So every center offers PD of some sort. And some of them, like I said, are on site. CLEAR's workshops, people would come here in the summer. We had people from well over 40 states that came through the years, and I could probably name at least a dozen countries where we had people coming in. So people do come from all over the place to come to these, and then the online ones, of course, are even more widely available. But it could be anything from teaching practices to a particular topic like intercultural competence, something that particular center is focused on. It could be general ones like assessment or technology in language teaching in general, or you might get ones that are language specific, like you might have an immersion workshop for French teachers or something like that. Lots and lots of different options, even more on the next page. So we mentioned earlier, like Pearl, this is one of the new LRCs that just started in the fall, but they already had an existing framework. So they're able to really hit the ground running and start up some of these professional development projects right away. Oops, we've cut off must have had a line wrapping issue there, sorry about that. But the African Center down in Indiana does really, really in-depth work for teachers of African languages. Also, further south there in Ohio, the NEA LRC does ones for East Asian languages. So depending on what your language interest is, there probably is a professional development opportunity for you at an LRC. As far as research and advocacy, again, they try to, different centers try to make themselves available as resources for convincing a school board that they should offer more foreign languages, or that they should start earlier, or introduce a program in elementary school. There's been a lot of work toward these seals of biliteracy. Michigan has one of these now. And it's just a designation that can go on a high school transcript and help that student just have that little edge in getting into a higher education setting. So LRCs have a lot of materials and advocacy work, along with ACTFL and some of the others, but trying to continue to promote foreign languages. And then as far as research, there's many, many journals that are supported by language resource centers. Hawaii has a number of online journals, reading in second languages and so forth. NHLRC chairs the Heritage Language Journal, which is an online journal on that community. Some of you may have heard of LLT, Language Learning and Technology, which CLEAR started with Hawaii back in '97 was the first issue. And so we published that. We were in charge of it up until this last cycle. Coral took our place in co-sponsoring that journal with Hawaii. But an excellent, excellent resource for technology as it pertains to language learning. And not just technology per se, but issues related to language learning in today's day and age and technology mitigated language learning. How classrooms can be enhanced by various technologies. So that is just the barest sort of glimpse at materials that are available through the LRCs. Like I said, I just kind of went in and grabbed some. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's the hardest about this is that there's so much.
Mm-hmm.
How do you decide what's, because you could take your whole life to look at everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then how do you pick?
You go to the LRC website. Wow, that was brilliant. That was brilliant. And I actually have it pulled up, and we can do a couple of searches so that you can see how you can narrow it down. So nflrc.org, and again, CLEAR actually started the website back, I don't know, 12 years ago or something, about the same time that we did that brochure. I guess it predates the brochure. Coral is in charge of it now down at Austin, but CLEAR was one of the flagship LRCs that worked to get all the LRCs to collaborate together, not just work independently. So the LRC website, and we'll have Galen talk, and then any remaining time, I think we should definitely explore the LRC website so that we can look at that. But easy place to find all the links, and it's of course updated whether centers are being funded or not. And then it has that database of materials. It also has a searchable calendar of all the PD. And there's also a lot of regional conferences and things that get put in there. So it's a kind of it's a good resource to find out what's happening in the PD world as well. All right, so let's go back to your slides. Okay, we'll go back to Galen and have him talk about the African language resources, because we wanted to focus not only, I mean, most of it's because we're language educators would be the Title VI language resource centers, but there are these national resource centers that are more, that we wanted to be able to give a voice as well. So go ahead, and you've got your 3 slides.
Let me make sure this is on.
It's on.
Yeah.
You're good. So Galen Sibanda.
Yes. Just in case we haven't met, I'm Galen Sibanda, and I'm going to be talking about resources from the African Studies Center. The African Studies Center, as already mentioned, is funded again this year. So they have Title VI. They have had that for several years, and I'm happy just to mention that we have several things that we offer to both students and instructors. First, let me mention the languages that we offer. We offer Swahili, Zulu, and Yoruba regularly because we have people on the ground to teach those. But we occasionally offer many other languages. In fact, if you look at our African Studies Center website, you'll probably see about 30 languages there that we offer occasionally. And this depend on student needs and the availability of funds. Okay. And because the African Studies Center is a non-teaching unit, the languages are offered in the Linguistics and Languages Department. For most of these languages, students apply for our FLAS fellowship funds. At the Computer Center.
Yep.
Yeah. So FLAS fellowships are open to U.S. citizens and permanent residents. And any students right across the university can apply for those if they want to take an African language. And our usual requirement, the requirements, these are from actually the Department of Education, that the student must be at the intermediate level, which is usually the second year or above, at least that's the minimum. Also, they should take, if they're intermediate, at the intermediate level, they should take at least a class with 4 credits. But at the advanced level, it's a minimum of 3. But our classes can take up to 5 credits. Yeah. However, for summer, what was specified is just the 140 hours at the intermediate level and 120 at the advanced level. And the students can take their FLAS fellowships to any other institution during the summer. So the academic year, they are here. But in the summer, we used to offer classes here, but because of MSU fees, we can't do that anymore. FLAS funds can't pay for MSU fees, so we stopped that. But students can take their FLAS fellowships to any other institution. If they are going to Africa and there is no where they can take the language here in the US, they are also free to take their fellowship to Africa and start the language there. And besides, for FLAS fellowships, besides the requirement that they study a language, students are also required to take an area studies class. And that class must have at least 25% African content. Once in a while, we do have students who will say, well, I don't have the 25% content in any of my classes. We sometimes allow those students to talk to their advisors and their instructors for the class. If the instructor says, okay, I can give the student work that amounts to that 25%, then we allow them to go ahead and take the class. Yeah. And also to mention about these FLAS fellowships, something to mention about these FLAS fellowships, students' fees are paid by this and also their living expenses. So it's very attractive to our students. Yeah. Okay.
Let me jump in before your last slide.
Yeah.
But so again, because the Asian Studies Center didn't receive Title VI funding this particular cycle, but they used to give FLAS. FLAS stands for Foreign Language and Area Studies. But that's what funds a lot of the less commonly taught languages courses on campus, African Studies, but Asian Studies lost that FLAS funding this cycle. But in the future, it's worth kind of keeping your ear to the ground to find out if you have students that you could encourage to apply for FAST fellowships in a multiple, not only the African languages, which of course there are so many options, but Asian Studies might cycle back to that in the future.
Yeah, even CASID, some of our students also sometimes come from CASID, but CASID didn't get the funding this cycle. Okay, yeah. I can move on to the next.
That was yours.
Yeah, okay. Okay, for instructors, we have professional development funds. We can send at least, I mean, every year we will be able to, for this cycle, every year we'll be able to send one of our instructors to the National African Language Resource Center in Indiana, for professional development. So if we have any instructor who wants to go this summer, they are free to get in touch with me and we can arrange that. There are also other funds right there from the National African Language Resource Center, like I think for those teaching Swahili, for instance, they have the StarTalk, so they can be funded through that. And for most of the other instructors, the National African Language Resource Center funds the tuition, but if you have other funds, you can pay for your own travel and living expenses. And their courses are usually about, I think one of them is 1 week, and then the other one is 2 weeks there at Indiana in Bloomington. Yeah. Then sometimes if we have extra funding from our Title VI funds, we also send our instructors to the ALTA conference, which is the African Language Teachers Association conference, and also to the African Studies Association. Although for the African Studies Association, for most of our instructors, except for those that are on the ground, for most of our instructors, they would have to travel with students. Usually the African Studies Center sometimes provides a van that goes to one of the institutions where the conference will be held. Yeah. And then maybe the last thing to mention is that for instructors also, they have to be aware that there are student organizations here on campus that they can utilize for their teaching. For instance, we have the Nigerian Students Association and so on. Sometimes those students are very useful for your own classes if you get to link with them. Yeah. And all those organizations are funded through the African Studies Center. And if you don't know what organization there is, if you go to the African Studies Center, they will let you know about those. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Questions
Any
for
questions?
Caitlin?
Yeah, yeah.
So does FLAS cover undergraduate and graduate?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So FLAS covers both graduate and undergraduate. And also, I should have mentioned that our competition is currently underway. So, yeah, so we are hoping to fund 7 graduate students. And our funding for undergraduates was actually increased. So we usually fund 3 undergrads, but this time we're going to be able to fund 5 for the academic year. And for summer, we have probably enough funds to fund. For summer, it doesn't matter. We usually just group everybody together. We have funds for about 16 people for the summer. Yeah.
So share that with your colleagues
Yeah.
who might have students interested in taking an African language. There's money out there. It's just a matter of.
Yeah. Yes.
How long does it cover, like, 2 years, or the whole undergraduate, or the
Okay.
graduate 2 years?
So for the academic year, it's just 1 year, but the student is free to apply the following year. Yeah. We used to try and make sure that the same students get funding the following year, because I think the thinking at that time, from the Department of Education, they would say, if you're going to fund somebody, then you want them to actually learn the language. If you take away the funding the following year, it's like that student hasn't really gotten much. But that also we have to balance with other things. Some students underperform. If they are underperform, we just have to take away the fellowship. Yeah.
Other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So I thought we could use the last few minutes just to answer any questions you have, but also just explore the Common website a little bit so you can see how to do a search. And that'll help you sort of get on the right path as far as not being overwhelmed by all of the materials. I'll give you that in case you want to write down either of our emails real quick, and then we'll switch over to the website. Any general questions in the meantime?
What's the best way to stay in touch with that? So to know, of course, you can go in the database and see what's already been done, but to keep up with it, what would you recommend for? I mean, you have a booth. There's a booth at ACTFL, right?
Yeah. So there's always the ACTFL conference. There's an LRC pavilion where all of the LRCs are represented, but if you don't have funding to go to ACTFL, as many people wouldn't, that's the website really is probably the best way. You could always contact the coordinating council, which is kind of the body that has a representative from each of the LRCs. There's no formal contact information for them, but I could certainly get it to you. A lot of the LRCs have individual newsletters. So if there was one, if Central Asian languages is your thing, you could get on CELCAR's mailing list, for example, and just drill down to one particular one that you wanted to keep tabs on, because they do have regular publications for each one. But there's no central LRC updates on all of us kind of a thing. Yeah, it would be neat. We're, of the NRCs don't have anything like a common website. And we did ours before the Cybers did theirs. And it's proven really popular because it does sort of provide a one central place to go. But it's true that it's confusing for, there's a lot. So we spend a lot of our time just trying to get people driven to that website or to the brochure. Are we okay if I skip over to the website? Okay. So this is not what it looks like. Where did you go? Oh, I've got maybe. Where's this little guy? What are we seeing? Okay, why am I not? Sorry. Let's try to get over what we see. I can see what I want you to see. You just can't see it.
Is it pulled over to the?
I don't think so. There. Oh, okay. There we go. Try to maximize this here. You can see my son's little eyeball there. So right on the main page, you have where you have the different places you can jump. This is not an elegant website. It's not maybe very user-friendly. It's kind of like everything is on the main page here, but it does also let you just dive right in. So for example, if I want to pull up something for French, I can specify which LRC if I only want to know what Indiana has created. I won't do that for this particular one. We can look for, well, I'm teaching listening this semester, so I want a listening activity. Maybe I don't care what level it is, so I'm not going to specify anything there. But, I am a high school teacher, so I want to specify 9 through, well, we're not, we're university, so we'll say a university. So you can see that you can really dig down. It doesn't mean that you're going to find things every time within those parameters, but you will find what can be found. So here, tagged for French, listening at the university audience, we came up with just 2 things, something from Minnesota and something from Hawaii. But that's 2 things more than you had 2 minutes ago, right? What language do you want me to try next? Go ahead and pick one.
Chinese.
Chinese, okay. Cantonese or Mandarin?
Mandarin.
Mandarin, okay. We'll do Mandarin. Why do I not see it? Mandarin. Why am I not seeing it? Okay, we'll try Chinese. Does it say? We'll try this. Okay, Chinese, do you care which LRC wrote it? Do we have a particular skill? Reading, speaking, listening?
Speaking maybe?
Speaking ideas, okay. Any particular level? So you can see how the search is updating itself as I do the parameters.
High school?
High school level, okay, so my audience is going to be 9 through 12. And we'll see what comes up. So we have 25 things that have come up, so it'll tell you how many. And then you can turn off the pagination so you can see them all in one big list. But you can see the national, this is the East Asian Language Resource Center down in Ohio. So a self-study guide to the film Strange Friends. Have you ever heard of the film Strange Friends? Don't know. Chinese communicating DVDs. So we have, and it'll also tell you what the format is. So you've got a couple of print materials here, something in audiovisual. Now, these are only as good as the tags that each center puts in, and some are more diligent than others about tagging all of their stuff thoroughly. But like I said, at least it's a place to get you started. So if I start scrolling down through all 25 of the resources, we've got things from Hawaii, something from CalPER, lots and lots from the center that you would expect, the East Asian Languages Center. Lots of print materials, some more audiovisual, and maybe they took this off. There used to be a way where you could click and only the free materials would come up. But I don't see that.
It's still down there.
Is it still down?
Up there.
Show free resources only, okay? So this one you might not be able to tell, but it does say show free resources only. So how many did we lose there? We had 25 before, and now we have more than 25. Now we have 44. So I must have knocked some other, I must have knocked out one of the other parameters when I did that. But you can see, so you've got mobile and tablet designation, web designations, and again, those are all free, those 44 resources. So it does take a little digging. We can't read your mind for exactly what it is that you're looking for, but at least this gives you a place to start. Any other questions? Oh, and poor Shannon, she told me she had to leave early, and so she didn't even get to see that, poor thing. Oh, well. Anything else?
What's the difference between the resources we find here and the other resources, like on other websites? What's the advantage of
So,
provided by this language center?
okay, so why so of course, there are thousands of resources that are fantastic that are all over the place. So this is just informing you about what Title VI centers are. They're a resource that many people haven't heard of because we're not actually allowed to use our federal funding for advertising, which is kind of funny, but it's just one of those little quirks. So it's not, of course, that there aren't amazing materials available through many, many other sources, but this is just a little glimpse into, these are not necessarily any better or worse than anybody else's resources. I'm just trying to point you in a direction you might not have known. Yeah. And because it is federally funded, like we said, a lot of the materials are free because they're supposed to be made available so that people can learn these languages. Yes. All right.
Is there any continuing series of learning materials, not only the
Well, I mean, a lot of the centers do have a whole series. Yeah, like Clear used to have things that we would develop in one language and then we would sort of duplicate it in many, many other languages. There are textbook series. The National African Center must have 30 different textbooks for different African languages. So absolutely, you'd kind of have to dig to see what you were looking for. But yes, definitely.
That's the beauty of it. I mean, they're going to be coordinated in one website where there's a lot of things offered together, and that once you sort of start looking around, you'll see that they have different areas of expertise, different sites offer different things. So for my students, the Coral has a lot of resources, and they have just as a starting place, their online foreign language teaching course is a very nice starting place. And then Carla has a lot of resources, the content-based language teaching.
And immersion.
I wasn't familiar with Pebble, but that sounds great. Castles, I mean, lots of them have these series, but for Asian languages, you've got Ohio, and there's also in
Southern California has, NorCal.
No, okay.
Yeah.
So I've met people from there, and they are working on languages that are also less commonly, even less commonly taught than Chinese.
They do a lot with Vietnamese.
They're
Yeah.
Vietnamese, Thai.
Yeah.
So,
So when you leave, if you'd like one of these, please take one for a colleague. It's just a nice overview to kind of keep on your desk, and you can, like, where were those LRCs again? And so please feel free to take one of those. Galen and I are available for questions if you have any.
Thank you.
Thank you.